Hello and welcome to part 1 of the Bouquet Toolkit. In this video I'll be showing you all of the basic equipment that you'll need to make any of my floral arrangements. And I'll also show you how to make the stems, and I'll go through all of the templates as well. So most of the equipment that you need to make my floral arrangements is quite inexpensive on its own. And if you're planning on making a few of these flowers for your own wedding or your event decor, then this is just a guide to show you which equipment is going to be really useful to have to hand. So you will of course need a pair of scissors, and you'll also need some sewing thread. Now I'll just use regular sewing thread, and I'll usually choose white. However, if I'm making coloured paper roses, I will tend to use a darker colour thread. You'll also need some florist tape. Now I like to use the dark green in a matte colour, and these are usually under £3 per roll. Glue wise, you'll need some wallpaper paste. Now I've already posted a video on how to make this up, so if you want to see that I'll put the link in the video description, or it's under my FAQ playlist. I like to use the wallpaper paste flakes and some water, and I mix it up in a pot and it's just there, and I just apply it with a regular old paintbrush. You'll also need some PVA glue. Now I like to use this so I can seal down the ends of the florist tape, and sometimes I'll put it underneath the ribbon loops and on the underbinding as well. And my go-to glue for the leaves is this high-tack glue. I have tried other brands, but this is my favourite. I'm not endorsed by them in any way, but yeah, this is my favourite. I like to use this when I make the leaves because it holds and it dries very, very quickly, and sometimes that's just what you need. You'll also need some regular kitchen foil. Now this one is an inexpensive, not terribly thick kitchen foil, and it's perfectly adequate. It's 30 centimetres wide. I will show you how to use the kitchen foil to make the stems later on in the video, so do use the timestamps in the video description if you need to jump to that part. If we're adding ribbon loops, then you'll also find it handy to have a stapler. You can do without the stapler, but I find it makes life a lot easier if you have one. And for the underbinding, it's also useful to have a bit of sellotape just to hold the underbinding in place, otherwise it can get very fiddly. So for the underbinding and for the ribbon loops around the edge of most of the arrangements that I make, I use this Oasis waterproof ribbon, and you usually get it on these massive spools. I tend to use ivory and white. It's the sort of ribbon that you can just tear to make thinner, and that you can use a pair of scissors to curl the ribbon with. It's a curling ribbon, decorative ribbon. It's sometimes handy to have a dressmaker's pin to hand as well. And for the leaves, I mostly use this flexible garden wire. It's a very thin wire that's coated in green plastic. It's very flexible, and I'm very sorry, but it doesn't have a gauge on it. But if you go to most garden centres, you'll be able to find some. It's quite flexible, and you can position it very easily, but it will still hold its shape. So that's the sort of wire that you're looking for. Occasionally I'll also use the Oasis wire. You can get these in all different gauges. I will discuss in each of the individual tutorials which wire I'll be using. I often use this to make long sprays of leaves. So I'll use the Oasis wire as a base, with the other flexible wire coming off with the individual leaves. And also on the larger arrangements, I'll also use the Oasis wire to make the flowers on, because the more flowers you add to a bouquet, the bigger the handpiece gets. And I don't like it when you get really chunky handpieces, but I also don't like it when you get really skinny handpieces. So the reason I use the foil on any arrangement that has less than 12 flowers is because it gives a nice, good size handpiece. And if I go over 12 flowers in an arrangement, I'll make the outer flowers with the Oasis wire so that we're not building too much bulk onto the handpiece. For making the English roses or the tea roses, you'll also find it handy to have some sort of a wooden stick to hand. Now I like to use these wooden kebab sticks for my single stems, and they're just convenient to use for curling the edges of the petals as well. If you don't have these, then you could use an old paintbrush, just a narrow paintbrush, nothing more than 5mm in width really, but anything that's thin and about, well, less than 5mm would be perfect. For some arrangements, it's also really handy to have a glue gun, particularly if we're making coloured paper roses and they get quite bulky. Ribbon wise, I use a variety of different ribbons. I like to use this single-sided knitted ribbon for binding the outer edge of the hand pieces. I find because it's single-sided, you've got a little bit of stretch in it, so you can curl it around and wind it up without the ribbon wrinkling. But I do like to use the double-sided satin for the trailing ribbons. And from time to time I'll use some organza, and occasionally I'll use this cord as well. As far as I'm aware, you can pick up most of these from your local craft shops or haberdashery shops, and on each of the individual tutorials I'll explain which ribbons you'll need before you commence making them. Some of my arrangements aren't bound with ribbon, they're bound with twine, so if we're working on some of those, then it's handy to have some of this natural coloured twine. I do tend to buy the natural Scottish twine where possible. So I'll just talk to you now about how to make the foil stems. Now I usually tear the foil at about 20 to 22 centimetres. It doesn't have to be too precise, but try not to make it less than 20 centimetres. Once you've got your foils, we want to fold them in half 3 times. And then scrunch at one end to form the stem shape, and then just twirl it between your fingertips and twist it as you twirl it. That's a bit of a tongue twister. And what you're left with is a nice stem. You want the stem to be compacted but still slightly flexible. You can download the template sheet from my Google Drive. I've put the link in the video description, so you can just go along there, and if you save it and then print it out on A4 paper at 100%, it will be exactly the right size. So template 1 I use for my basic Novella rose and for my English roses. I also use template 1 to make rosebuds as well. Template 2 I use for the tea roses and for the mini roses. So leaf template number 1 is the basic leaf shape that I use for most of my floral arrangements, from single stems to bouquets. Sometimes I will cut little notches out of them, and sometimes I'll leave them smooth. It's your personal preference. Leaf shape number 2 is slightly narrower and slightly shorter, and I like to use this on several of my arrangements as well. Leaf shape number 3 I call my eucalyptus style leaf. It's slightly rounded, and when they're all together they just have the effect of the eucalyptus leaves. Leaf shape number 4 I tend to use on sprays of leaves. And leaf shape number 5 I generally only use on a couple of my single stems, but there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't use it in a wedding bouquet. The idea behind this toolkit is that you can learn the basics and then even start making your own. So if you do have any questions about any of the equipment in this video, then do leave a comment below and I will get back to you as soon as I see it. And in the other 4 videos that will go along in this playlist, I will be showing you how to make the book page roses and the coloured paper roses. I'll be showing you how to make the leaves and how to do all the binding as well. And my individual bouquet tutorials will now refer to this rather than me having to keep repeating myself in all of the other videos. So thank you for watching. Do give me a thumbs up if you've made it this far. Your support is greatly appreciated.